On his way back home from a daily stroll to the market, a man paused near a dumpster when he noticed a small bundle of fur. There, huddled on the sandy ground, was a bobcat kitten no more than 3 or 4 weeks old. Alone, ribs showing, its cries thin and desperate. Reaching into his market bag, he found only the meat he had just purchased. He tried to tear off the tiniest strip, but the smallest piece he could manage was still far too large for such a frail creature. Carefully, he knelt and extended the meat toward its mouth. The bobcat sniffed, then sank its teeth into the raw flesh with a strength that seemed to come from pure survival instinct. With the meat clenched tight in its jaws, the bobcat dragged it off to a hidden spot, vanishing into the shadows and leaving the man amazed by what he had just witnessed. Years passed until one cold winter night when something extraordinary happened on his porch. What he discovered there would leave even the most experienced wildlife expert speechless. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. It was one of those slow, golden afternoons that only happens in the last days of summer. The sky over our little town was washed in pale blue and the heat shimmered above the blacktop like a mirage. I had just come back from the farmer's market with a sack of tomatoes under one arm and a paper-wrapped parcel of meat under the other when I heard the thin, rasping cry. For a rehabber like me, those sounds stop you in your tracks. They cut through the hum of cicadas and the chatter on the porch and take you right back to the countless nights of bottle-feeding raccoons and bandaging wings and coaxing orphaned deer to drink. You learn to listen, to separate the cry of hunger from the cry of fear. This one was both. High, persistent, and desperate. It seemed to come from behind the old diner, near the row of rusty dumpsters where half-wild house cats sometimes scavenged. Most people who live around here keep walking. Living as I do at the edge of the national forest, you see a lot of wildness. You come to understand that letting nature take its course is often the kindest thing. But when something small and helpless cries like that, the part of me that had spent decades rehabilitating owls with broken wings and possums hit by cars would not let me ignore it. I set my bags down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and crept around the corner of the diner, careful not to startle whatever might be hiding there. What I saw froze me where I stood. Amid a tangle of discarded cardboard and weeds, huddled on a patch of sun-warmed sand, was a ball of mottled fur no bigger than a man's hand. At first, my heart leapt. I thought it was a kitten abandoned by some careless owner. But as it lifted its head and bared tiny teeth at me, I saw tufts on the ears, white spots on the back of the ears like little eyes, and a short tail with black bands. Its coat was tawny and spotted, the fur on the belly creamy white. It wasn't a house cat, it was a bobcat, a wild bobcat kitten, maybe 3 or 4 weeks old, thin enough that I could see the outline of ribs beneath the fur, and hungry enough that it shook with the effort of standing its ground. I had raised bobcats before. People find them when loggers clear the forests, or when hunters shoot the mother and leave the kittens orphaned. The first thing they always want to do is cuddle them. The second thing they do is ask if they can keep them. The answer to both is no. Wild animals can tolerate us when they must, but to survive, they need to remain wild. Our job as rehabbers is not to tame them, but to save them, to give them a second chance at the life that was taken from them. That means proper nutrition, minimal handling, and a release as far from people as possible. It's a hard line to walk when a pair of blue eyes is staring at you, but it's the line we have to hold. In that alleyway, though, this tiny animal was past the point of lines and protocols. It was starving. I checked my market bag. Aside from the tomatoes, which wouldn't do it any good, I had the meat I'd just bought for dinner, a pound of chuck steak. I tore open the package with my teeth. Raw meat without bone or supplement isn't a complete diet for a growing bobcat. They need the calcium from bones and the nutrients from organs. But this wasn't about nutrition over weeks. This was about survival over minutes. I tried to pinch off a small piece, but my fingers, clumsy with urgency, could not rip a morsel thin enough. Eventually, I just held out a chunk about the size of my thumb and crouched, arm extended, as if offering a handshake to a wild thing. The kitten backed away at first, hissing in a voice that would have been comical had it not been so pitiable. But the smell of blood on the air was too much. It crept forward, nose working, golden eyes locked on mine, as if daring me to make a move. Then, faster than I could have imagined, it lunged. Needle-like teeth sank into the beef and hung on. I felt the tug reverberate down my arm. That little body that could have been blown away by a stiff wind braced itself, claws scraping against concrete, and began to tear at the meat with a ferocity that surprised us both. Tiny growls rumbled in its chest. Each bite looked like it took everything it had left, but it kept going. It wasn't just eating, it was fighting. Every pull a promise not to go quietly. Watching that struggle hit me in the chest. People love to romanticize wild animals, to make them symbols for courage or grace. But in that moment, I saw raw determination, raw need. The wild isn't beautiful because it's perfect. It's beautiful because it's relentless. That kitten, skin stretched over bones, fur matted with dirt, embodied a will to live that some humans I know could learn from. I knelt there in the alley, my knees burning against the gravel, and felt both awe and sorrow. Awe that such a small thing could be so fierce, sorrow that it had come to this. When it had enough muscle to drag the meat away, the kitten clamped its tiny jaw around the slab and with a monumental heave, pulled it behind an overturned crate. A flash of spotted fur, a whip of that black-banded tail, and it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I sat back on my heels and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Somewhere overhead, a crow cackled. Somewhere in the alley, a life continued, hanging by a thread but refusing to let go. The next day, I could not stay away. I'd spent the night calling a few colleagues at wildlife centers 2 counties over, asking if anyone had room for a bobcat kitten. Their cages were full. Spring had been rough, and we were all inundated with orphans, fawns whose mothers had been hit by trucks, baby squirrels shaken from nests by storms. One rehabber said she could take the bobcat in a week if I could stabilize it. That meant feeding, hydrating, weighing, and keeping it as wild as possible all at once. It sounded impossible, but I drove back to town with formula designed for carnivores, a couple of syringes, and a plan. He was there in the same spot, eyes brighter but body no less thin. He recognized me, or at least the brown paper bag in my hand. This time I tore the meat into smaller strips. I laid them on the ground and stepped back. The kitten approached cautiously, scooped up the strips one by one, then retreated behind the crate again. I could hear the soft crunch as he chewed. After the meat was gone, he reappeared, sitting a cautious distance away, licking his whiskers. I held out my hand, palm down, letting him smell me. He sniffed, and to my surprise, leaned forward so his forehead touched my fingers. I scratched lightly between his ears the way I had with so many cats. Instead of striking, he leaned in. A faint rumble vibrated through his head. He purred. That sound, that small, trusting vibration in my hand, was like a key turning in a door I didn't know existed. Rehabilitation is a balancing act. For every animal that needs us to hold a bottle to its mouth, there's another that only needs us to keep our distance. People always ask how we stop ourselves from bonding. The truth is, you don't. You bond. You get your heart broken 100 times by creatures you can never own and must never keep. You bond, and you let go anyway. That's the job. Still, as that bobcat rolled over and batted gently at my fingers like a house cat, something shifted. He was no longer just an animal in need. He was an individual with a personality. There was mischief in his golden eyes. His paws, oversized for his body, had tufts of fur between the toes. He had a patch on his shoulder that looked like a thumbprint pressed into the fur. Even wild animals are made of details. The longer you look, the more you see. And the more you see, the more you care. I was so focused on him that I didn't hear my neighbor approach until she spoke. "What in the world are you doing back here?" she said, laughter in her voice. I jumped. In that second of distraction, a shadow streaked past me. By the time I turned back, the kitten was gone, the only sign of his presence a few grains of sand displaced by tiny paws. My neighbor peered around me, curiosity giving way to concern as she realized I wasn't joking. Was that a bobcat?" "It's a bobcat," I said, "a baby, orphaned." Her eyes widened. "What are you going to do with it?" "What I always do," I replied. "Try to keep it alive, then let it go." She shook her head as if unsure whether to admire or pity me and walked on, vegetables under one arm. I gathered my things and headed home, heart heavy with the knowledge that this wasn't a typical rescue. I knew enough to know that bobcats need each other for proper socialization. They need to roughhouse with siblings, to learn the limits of their bites, to practice stalking, to discover which scents are of prey and which are of predator. Alone, they often become imprinted on their caregiver. They become too bold around people, a death sentence when released. Still, leaving him there meant a slower, crueler death. I chose the lesser of two evils. I live in an old farmhouse on the edge of the forest. It was my grandparents' once, a place where the smell of pine resin and oak leaves always seems to linger. The porch boards creak, the screen door squeaks. Out back, down a path of flagstones, are the enclosures I've built over the years. Wooden-framed pens with netting stretched over the top, climbing logs, perches, water troughs. They house hawks with broken wings learning to fly again, fox kits learning to pounce, a young otter that needed to swim daily to build up muscle. It's not a zoo. It's a halfway house between tragedy and freedom. For the bobcat, I prepared the smallest of these enclosures at first. Straw bedding for warmth, branches to climb, a den box to hide in. I lined the walls with tall grass cut from the field to soften the impact if he leapt. When I returned to the alley that evening, I brought a live trap baited with the scent of meat. I set it and waited. The sun began to set, casting long shadows and turning the world the color of tarnished brass. Finally, a rustle. A soft, cautious footfall, a whiskered face sniffing the trap, a body sliding inside, a spring snapping shut. I covered the trap with a towel to reduce his stress and carried him to my truck, heart pounding louder than his hissing. The first week was a blur of feeding schedules and midnight checks. Bobcat kittens at that age require food every few hours. Their systems are delicate. Too much can cause diarrhea, too little, and they fade. I weighed him each morning, recording ounces gained or lost in a notebook smudged with paw prints and formula stains. Gradually, the numbers crept up. He went from barely a pound to 2 pounds, then 3. His eyes lost that sunken look. His coat began to shine. He discovered the joy of water, splashing a paw in a shallow pan and staring at the ripples as if he'd created magic. He practiced pounces on unsuspecting leaves, his hindquarters wiggling comically before the leap. He explored every corner of his enclosure, climbing to the highest perch to survey his kingdom, tail twitching. He hissed at me whenever I entered, which made me smile. A wild bobcat should not greet a human like an old friend. He would snarl until I set the food down, then wait until I'd retreated before eating. He was learning that humans meant food but not affection. It hurt a little more each day, but it was right. 2 weeks in, the rehabber from the county over called. A wildfire had swept through her area, cutting off roads and forcing evacuations. She would not be able to take the bobcat until the fall. By then, I knew he would be beyond simple cage life. He would need acres to roam, trees to climb, and miles between him and the nearest front porch. I had a decision to make. Transferring him now to a facility he did not know could stress him enough to set him back. Keeping him here would require resources I hadn't planned on, and would mean that every mistake I made would have consequences measured in his chances of survival. I sat on my porch that night, the sounds of the forest around me. A barred owl calling "Who cooks for you?" The rustle of a possum in the underbrush. In the sky above, bats swooped after moths. In the enclosure nearby, the bobcat's shadow moved past the wire mesh. I felt the weight of responsibility in my bones. This wasn't like nursing a songbird or bandaging a rabbit. This was raising a predator destined to weigh up to 30 pounds, to roam territories that can span miles, to take down rabbits and turkeys and perhaps even the occasional deer. This was not a pet. He would never be a pet. He deserved more than a cage. He deserved to be what he was born to be. I decided to keep him until he could leave on his own terms. That meant a shift in how I thought about my role. I became his teacher as much as his caretaker. I started hiding his food so he'd have to search for it. I introduced whole prey, supplementing with calcium-rich bones and organ meat to mimic what his mother would have provided. I dragged branches across the enclosure to leave scent trails for him to follow. I planted grasses and shrubs to attract mice and insects so he could practice stalking live prey. Each day, I made sure he associated my voice with caution rather than comfort. I spoke to him only when necessary, using a low tone that reminded me to keep my distance. I resisted the urge to stroke his ears or to laugh when he tripped over his own paws. I let him roughhouse with stuffed toys, pouncing and clawing and sinking his teeth into fur-lined bags filled with feathers. When he lost his baby teeth, I collected them from the straw as mementos, tiny ivory crescents that fit on my thumbnail. The seasons turned. By late autumn, the first frost silvered the grass. The leaves of the maples turned crimson, the oaks went bronze. The bobcat's coat grew thick and plush, the spots more pronounced. He weighed nearly 10 pounds and moved with a grace that was both alarming and thrilling. On chilly mornings, I would find him perched on a log, steam rising from his fur. On warm afternoons, he would nap in the shade, muscles twitching as he dreamed. At night, when the stars brightened and the coyotes howled, he would pace, ears erect, body taut. There was a restlessness in him that no enclosure could contain. One morning, I opened the door of his enclosure to clean, and he didn't hiss. He didn't approach me either. He looked past me, beyond the fence, to the forest. It was as if a magnet had turned. everything about him oriented outward. I knew then that the time was coming. I spent the next few weeks preparing. I called the wildlife biologist at the state agency to arrange for a soft release, a gradual introduction to the wild. We selected a site deep within the national forest, far from human trails and roads, near a year-round creek and a stand of cedar for shelter. I built a transition pen there, using natural logs and camouflage netting. One early morning, while the mist still clung to the valleys, I drove him to the site in a crate, my hands tight on the steering wheel. He didn't make a sound. When we arrived, I opened the crate door into the transition pen and stepped back. He slid out, low to the ground, sniffing the unfamiliar earth. He tested the air, ears flicking. He was alert, but not afraid. After a week, with me delivering food at dusk and making as little human scent as possible, I opened the transition pen and let him decide. That moment, when a creature you have nurtured walks away without looking back, is like ripping off a bandage from an old wound. It hurts, but it heals something too. He stepped through the opening, paused with one paw still inside, and lifted his head. His eyes met mine for a second. In them I saw neither the softness of a pet nor the fear of a captive. I saw recognition of something shared and acknowledgement of something ended. Then he turned, faded into the underbrush, and was gone. For weeks afterward, I drove out to the release site every evening, just to make sure there were no fresh tracks near the transition pen. I left a trail camera strapped to a tree. The camera caught glimpses of deer, raccoons, and once, just once, a spotted shape moving with fluid grace across the frame. It was him. His tail had thickened. His shoulders had broadened. He moved with confidence. It made my throat tighten to see him thrive. And yet a small, selfish part of me hoped, perhaps foolishly, that he would miss me as I missed him. The year that followed was a busy one. I took in 3 owlets blown from their nest, a litter of opossums whose mother had been killed on the highway, and a fox with mange. Life moved on. The seasons cycled through as they always do. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I would sit on the porch and think of the bobcat. The wind in the pines would sound like him moving through brush. The crunch of leaves underfoot would make me look up, expecting to see a spotted form. He did not come. I told myself that was a success. A bobcat that doesn't return to human presence is a bobcat that survives. But then, as autumn tipped again toward winter and the first frost painted the fields, I heard a noise on the porch that stopped my heart. It was a soft thump, followed by a scratching, and then the unmistakable sound of fur against wood. I eased open the door, cold air wrapping around me. On the porch, in the glow of the porch light, stood a bobcat the size of a large dog. Her coat was thick and beautiful. Her eyes were amber and unflinching. In her mouth, she held a rabbit, its fur still warm, its body limp. Behind her, 3 smaller shapes bounced and tumbled over each other, swatting at dry leaves, staring wide-eyed at the world. Bobcat kittens. Her kittens. She dropped the rabbit at my feet and looked up at me. For a moment, time folded in on itself. I was back in that alley, kneeling, holding out a piece of meat to a starving kitten. Except now that kitten had grown, now she was feeding me. I sank to my knees, not caring that the cold seeped through my jeans. Tears blurred my vision. "You remembered," I whispered, my voice catching. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead into my chin, the way she had years ago when she'd first trusted me. Her head was larger now, the bones beneath thick. Her ears were tufted with long black hair. I could feel the strength in her shoulders. I scratched gently behind her ears, tracing the spot where the white patch had been when she was a baby. She leaned into my hand, then stepped back. One of her kittens crept closer, emboldened by her calm. It batted at the laces of my boots, then jumped back, startling itself. I laughed through tears. I reached out a finger to touch its nose, but she growled softly, a warning. I withdrew. They were hers, not mine. They had to learn to fear people. That gift, the rabbit on the porch, was for me. This moment of contact was for us, but the boundary remained. We stayed like that for several minutes, the chilly night around us, her breath pluming in the air, the kittens playing at her feet. Then, as silently as she had come, she gathered her young with a chirp and vanished into the dark. I picked up the rabbit. It was fat and healthy, its fur thick, its body heavy. I placed it on the ground at the edge of the trees, a way of giving it back to her, though I knew she had given it to me as a sign of gratitude, perhaps, or of acknowledgement. Animals don't think like we do, but they remember kindness. They react to consistency. That bobcat had survived because once, years ago, someone had fed her when she could not feed herself. She had learned to hunt and to thrive. Now, as a mother, she had come back to show me she had made it and that she had brought more life into the world. After that night, she visited once more, late in the winter, her kittens bigger, their spots fading as their winter coats thickened. They watched from the edge of the yard while she sat just within the circle of light cast by the porch, her eyes reflecting green. I spoke to her softly, a habit I couldn't suppress. I told her how proud I was, how grateful. She blinked slowly, that cat language of trust, then melted away into the trees. I never saw her again. Occasionally, in the years that followed, I would see tracks in the snow near the creek or hear a bobcat's yowl from deep in the woods, and I would smile, imagining her out there, teaching her kits to stalk and leap and survive. People sometimes ask me why I keep doing this work when it breaks my heart over and over. I tell them it's because of moments like that one on the porch. Rehabilitation is more than feeding and bandaging. It's a promise we make to the wild things that share our world. It's an acknowledgement that, though we can never truly tame them or own them, we can choose to make their path a little easier when our actions have made it harder. It's an act of humility, understanding that we are not the center of the story, but a footnote in theirs. A wild animal's life is never easy. Most bobcat kittens never make it to adulthood. Disease, starvation, predators, and human interference take their toll. To see one not only survive, but return with her own healthy young is rarer than most people realize. It's a testament to resilience and to the power of small kindnesses. When I think back to that afternoon behind the diner when I ripped open my dinner to save a bundle of fur, I realize I wasn't saving just one life. I was touching the lives of every kit that mother would ever raise. And perhaps those kits will have kits of their own, growing up in a forest where maybe, just maybe, people are a little less of a threat because one man once decided to see them as something other than pests. So I keep walking toward the cries when others walk away. I keep picking up the broken, the starving, the orphaned. I keep letting my heart break and mend. Because sometimes, years later, something unbelievable happens. A bobcat stands on your porch in the glow of the porch light, eyes shining like gold, her own young tumbling at her feet, and she says thank you in the only way she knows how. And in that moment, every sleepless night, every vet bill, Every time I've had to hold an animal and let it go is worth it.